Coming up next on Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, NVIDIA's Kal-El's got the 5th core, Corsair's amazing new keyboards, upgrade options from Flight Sims and Core i3's, monitor hacks, and much more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 138, recorded September 22nd, 2011. 5th core, NVIDIA, just ship it.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by Mr. Ryan Shrout, and we are both actually at home. Well, he's in his hometown. I'm in actually my living room, so it should be exciting. We've got Seamus stapled down with Phineas and Ferb on the iPad, so this should be a 3 episode. Dude,
Phineas and Ferb is my favorite kids' cartoon on. When we have the nieces and nephews over, I actually enjoy watching that show myself. I'm not going to lie. I can't do it.
You got to love a cartoon where they're building stuff.
Yeah, it's a fun, like, engineering kind of based cartoon, right? They build things that you'd never actually be able to build when you were 6 years old, more than likely. But it's kind of fun. Unlike
Transformers, it's not mindless crap designed to sell toys.
Yeah, but I like Transformers too, so...
I'm not saying you can't love Transformers. I'm just trying to avoid Seamus finding out about it. Speaking of things we weren't finding out about until late, NVIDIA, it's all about ARM. It's all about the mobile. That's their total future. They're going to ship parts. No, actually, don't mind our ship dates. We've got a 5th core.
They kind of glossed over the whole shipping date change, right? We were supposed to actually have Kal-El-based products by the end of the year, right?
Right.
And now not so much.
We're supposed to have them we're supposed to have parts this summer, I thought, and then basically it comes out the Kal-El Tegra system on a chip and big graphs. Actually, we should probably pull up the big graph, the big graphic from the presentation front page of PCPro.com's write-up. It's 1 core, it's 2 cores, it's 3 cores, it's 4 cores, and the companion core, the 5th core. I feel like
I'm not a fan of that name,
Baldwin,
by the way.
Talking about the 3rd heat. You know what I mean? We can cook a full Thanksgiving dinner in 18 minutes with the 3rd heat. The point of the companion core, which I agree is a bizarre name, I think they may just run out of stuff for it. It's basically the background CPU. It's handling MP3 playback. It's handling background process. It's handling push messages from the mothership. But this looks like a really interesting chip, right? Security engine display, HDMI output, MEM-IO, ISP audio, HD video encoder, HD video decoder. So obviously they're planning to be doing video capture on these. The ARM7, standalone GPU, and 5 cores of goodness, 4 usable cores, and 1 core that basically sips very little energy in the background. Right. I thought it was also interesting is like the companion core is a patented technology.
I don't know how much I can buy into that, right? Because the theory and the process that they're going through with the addition of this core isn't new necessarily. Like it's something that's been done. That's the whole idea of a coprocessor in general, right? Is you have processors that are more efficient at doing certain things, so you would include those, and right. So the addition of this companion core, which I think the neatest part for me from a technological standpoint is that it's actually built out of different transistors than the rest of the chip.
I was trying to decide if that was, is that a tech win or is that like, because I can hear Intel engineers going like, we can throttle back our CPUs for maximum battery saving. Why can't you? You know what I mean? Because you can hear the slightly intoxicated engineer sniping going on in the background.
You would be exactly correct there. No, I think you're right there, because this is one of the limitations NVIDIA has, because they don't control their foundry, right? They go to TSMC, which is a third-party Taiwanese company. They're dependent on TSMC's process technology to address all of their needs. You think about 40 nanometer process also builds the GTX 580 graphics card, and they're trying to get it to build a Tegra system on a chip that's going to build up in your cell phone. And so there's a large variance there, and it's an ingenious solution to a problem that has been around for a long time. The problem being, we want to get the most performance possible out of a processor, but we also want it to use the least amount of power when it's idle, when it's doing very little work. And unfortunately, the bands of process technology don't lend themselves to do that. And in reality, if Intel can do what they say they're going to do with the 22 nanometer process, they'll be the first ones that'll be able to do that. They'll be able to kind of have the super server size chip and the like cell phone size, tablet size chips on the exact same process with very little tweaking involved. But this one, so the companion core will run at very low voltages with very low leakage, meaning that it won't spend a lot of your battery power on your phone. But it's like maximum clock speed is about 400 to 500 megahertz, which is relatively low, even for the smartphone world. Whereas the other 4 cores they'll probably end up getting close to 1.5 gigahertz. But the downside is if they try to use just those 4 cores, they would be, I would say, once they got down to that 300-400 megahertz clock speed, they're going to be using way more power than the companion core would on its own. So by combining the 2 different technologies, having both a low power and a high performance process technology physically on the same die, which is kind of impressive to me. There's basically a little part of it will be low power based and all the other transistors will be high performance based. They're trying to combine it, but it comes at the cost of extra die size. It comes at the cost of much more complex engineering on their end. And I think, this is just my guess, has something to do with the delay in product release, right? Maybe they had no plans. Maybe this is not something they've been hiding for very long, but rather this is something they had to add in kind of at the last minute when they noticed that their idle power consumption and their battery levels on these very sensitive devices for cell phones and tablets weren't as good as they had expected or predicted.
And there you have it.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty cool, and it's you're still going to get the power of 4 cores when you need it in your mobile phone, but I think it could be really good, and it's kind of one of those. It's definitely a hack job mentality to things. It's not very elegant. Their press release and their white papers.
I mean, I think hacks are okay if they work. My issue here at this point is like, Boxy's launch just got wiped out by Tegra not hitting ship dates, and now it feels like I just want, I want NVIDIA to hit ship dates. I want the parts to work, and mostly I want to have the part in my hand and see what the battery life is like. If they deliver the battery life with the hack, I am, ridiculously happy. NVIDIA's got a business plan and all as well.
I think at this point we're going to be fortunate to see more than a couple of very exclusive products released by CES of next year, which is definitely a step back from their kind of really aggressive roadmaps. I think they're finding that this whole ARM SoC business is a little more difficult, both in the sales side and in the engineering side than they maybe thought, now that they're especially getting into these kind of much more custom designs than just taking an ARM core off the shelf and running with it.
We're used to 42 billion transistors for a single GPU. Now we're going to get really serious. One last thing from IDF we didn't talk about last week. Knight's Ferry shown 8 deep running ray tracing. It's kind of this, talk about a great big shiny box full of pain. 256 processor cores in a box. Essentially, this is a rack mount server box doing serious ray tracing by mounting. Are these? It's funny. So the Knight's Ferry. Okay, so the Knight's Ferry mini-core processor discrete cards, each one of those blue cards you see in that box, or you can kind of see the number of slots in there, each one of those is a chip with 32 Intel architecture cores running 1.2 gigahertz, which is like faster. Each core can handle 4 threads for a total of 1,024 threads in flight at any given time. 16-bit wide vector processing mods. This is crazy.
So you remember Larrabee talk years ago now? This is kind of what's left of it. This is the Larrabee project, the mini Intel core architectures that they built with the goal of making discrete graphics cards, and now they're being used as kind of high performance computing platforms. And it's impressive to see. It was loud. It used a lot of power. It has 3 power supplies behind it. But this is truly 1024 Intel architecture-based computing threads running at the same time, doing 1080p ray tracing. Not as good a quality as Modern Warfare 2 or Battlefield 3 or anything like that, but it looks pretty good. And they've started to implement some advanced features. It's all for research purposes on the back end of Intel software teams. But I guess at least they're doing something with all the money they spent on this development process. And I actually saw, I don't have it in this article, there's a picture of the back of the card, and one of the most kind of interesting things is you can kind of tell the size of the chip based on the size of the bracket on the back of a graphics card. And the back of this, essentially, which is a graphics card just without any outputs, it was like an enormous bracket. So not a small chip, it would appear, either.
Not a small chip. Not a.
They are planning 50+ core versions of this, I think, by the end of this year as well. So they're still progressing down that line, which is kind of interesting. Not for gaming necessarily, although there are some applications of it for ray tracing, but for high-performance computing, people who want to put 6 or 7 or even 8 of these in a server and spit them out, right?
This sounds like very narrow, very vertical fields where people are used to paying a lot of money. Architectural rendering, high-end engineering and design, CAD/CAM situations, maybe Hollywood rendering type stuff. It'll be interesting to see where these eventually show up. Corsair is a name we usually think of for power supplies and memory and lots of things, but not keyboards and mice. And
that's because this is their first time in there.
That would explain that. The 2 mice, 2 keyboards. You're bordering on excited about this. I get excited about keyboards all the time.
Yeah, I was going to ask if are you a keyboard nerd?
I am a delete expletive keyboard nerd with rabies.
So what is your personal preference in keyboard style? Like, do you like the loud clicky keys, the cherry switches?
I prefer an Alps-based buckling spring keyboard, preferably an IBM Model M of a certain vintage. I have literally a 27-gallon storage box full of these things that I've been, acquiring at garage sales for the last 15 years. Actually, there's some really nice modern ones, which are great because you get all the special Apple or Windows keys on them, which will be even more critical when Windows 8 and Metro works its way into my lifestyle. But yeah, ideally, if I'm not in a situation where I'm going to wake up every single person in the house by using them, I'm using the switch-based keyboards. I got to say, a lot of the modern membrane keyboards are actually pretty usable. But ideally, I want the big giant clacky keyboard because I can type like the wind.
Now, what's interesting? Go ahead. The Corsair, they're an enthusiast brand. They're very specific about who they're catering to most of the time with their water cooling stuff and their power supplies kind of aimed at the high end stuff. So the keyboards and mice are doing the same thing. What I find interesting that they've done is they've created 2 lines. Like they have the K60, which is the keyboard, and the M60, which is a mouse, aimed at first-person shooters, people who play first-person shooters. And then they have the K90 and the M90 aimed at MMO players, or just those style of games. So if you look at like the Vengeance K60, it has some pretty neat features like the WASD keys are different color, they're textured differently, they're kind of sloped differently because of how your hands rest on them while you're playing a game. The first, I think, 1 through 6 have that same kind of different texture to it. The frequent keys you had to change weapons and that kind of deal. So that's kind of cool. And then it comes with a wrist rest as well that fits right underneath where the WASD, the WASD keys actually sit. And even kind of more interesting than that is if you open up that wrist rest, it's kind of a hollow on the inside, you can replace the WASD keys with the standard black finish on them. And, it comes with a little tool to easily remove and replace those keys as well. They do a pretty good job. They're both backlit, these keyboards, made out of aluminum, pretty sturdy devices. I just got a few quick hands-on minutes with both of them, but they're pretty impressive. Like the MMO keyboard has we got 18 macro keys and then a switch so you can have 3 sets of those. So you have 3 sets
wow.
of 18 macro keys. I mean, it's pretty insane. And these do use Cherry MX Red mechanical switches. So they're going to be about $100 keyboards.
Yeah, but they last forever, and they feel good.
I know some people
feel better.
Some people balk when they hear $100 for a keyboard, right? But there is a pretty big difference.
I've always been amazed that and this is something from back when I was running the hardware section at Windows Sources about 1,000 years ago. So I always tried to get a monitor and a keyboard or a mouse in every hardware section, because your eyeballs will fall out of your face. Not so much today with LCD flat panels, but back in the CRT days, like, a bad monitor would just ruin you would just destroy your eyesight, or at least it would just put considerably additional strain on your eyes. And you'd watch somebody back in the day. You could spend like $3,000 on a keyboard. You could spend $3,000 on a keyboard by the same people that bought you the Weird 2 phone directed towards Arab oil sheiks and obscenely wealthy Wall Street degenerates. Have you seen the Weird 2 phones, like the $10,000?
Yes.
It's like a classic Nokia phone that does almost nothing, just surrounded by platinum. So it's like another $9,900 more than it would be otherwise. But you'd watch people, they'd spend like $3,000 on a system, and they'd buy like a $12 throwaway keyboard. And I got to say, like the $15 Microsoft IntelliMouse is still one of my favorite input devices of all time. I prefer a good high-end ball for my home system. I use that a lot. But it's amazing. People buy cheap keyboards and they've never even realized that they could have a better typing experience. They get a more comfortable experience. They wouldn't wear their keyboards. I've seen people who their keyboards barely responded. I'm like, dude, get a new keyboard. It'll change everything. And they look at me like I'm a obsessive freak, which I probably am. But I'm excited actually to see somebody that like. There's clicky keyboards. There's a couple of vendors out there that have been making buckling spring keyboards for a while. But this is exciting to see a high-end, high-profile manufacturer doing a really nice keyboard. The design, actually, it's very stylish. I like it.
They are. They're really nice looking. And then the mice, very similar type specific features. The FPS one has a button on the thumb area of the mouse that you hold down. They call it the sniper button. It basically slows down the DPI on the mouse, lowers it to whatever setting you want to put in software.
Nice.
Adjustable DPIs by the scroll wheel. And then look at the MMO one. It has, I'm trying to think, what is this? They go up to 1,000 hertz report rates. Oh, there are 15 programmable buttons on the MMO mouse on the M90.
That's a bit much.
So if you look at a picture of like the thumb area, yeah, there he is. He's brought up that picture of thumb area. I mean, look at all those buttons. I do not have the dexterity in any of my fingers to properly only touch one of those buttons. It's just
house. You're married. You're obviously not a truly dedicated PC.
But they have fancy lights.
And there you have it. Ooh, shiny. I'll be curious actually to see how that feels in hand, because a lot of the gaming mice, it's funny. It's like, I like the idea of throw weights. I really love the idea of adjustable, DPI settings and stuff. But a lot of them just feel just horrible for day-to-day use because they just don't fit your hand particularly well. This one has potential though.
I don't think I used the finished product, but some of the early prototypes and stuff when I happened to be in the San Francisco area, they were showing to me a little while ago, and they were nice. It was cool. Corsair, and they're like with their cases, that they kind of were a very, very late comer into cases, but they did a very good job on those. They spent a lot of time developing them. They weren't cheap. They weren't budget at all, but they thought of a lot of little things. So I'll be curious if they're able to do the same thing with this keyboard and mouse. One other quick mention I wanted to bring up. We always talk about micro ATX or mini ITX type devices. And something came out, was just announced today, Zotac, which is a company that we probably all know of for making like the small Z-Box devices, the mini ITX based small form factor PCs. Yeah, that they've done very well for themselves, creating this like niche market. They released a mini ITX based AMD A75 motherboard. So it'll use basically the Llano processor, the AMD platform with the really good integrated graphics on it. And it has a full-size PCI Express by 16 slot, but you don't really need it if you're talking about a mini ITX system and you're going to use integrated graphics with it. It has Wi-Fi on it. It has gigabit Ethernet. This is basically add a processor, one DIMM, and a hard drive, and you've got a great home theater PC, or even a really cheap, really low-end basic gaming system. I've built systems out of these types of motherboards, not this one specifically yet, but I mean, it's got DVI and HDMI and VGA output, 4 SATA 6 gigabit per second ports, 8 USB 3.0 ports. That's actually kind of impressive. That's the most I think I've seen on it.
Yeah, no. It's like this is a big home theater box, you know, a server box, a little high powered for a server box, but they. You know, you're not going to be overclocking on this one. But I do like the fact that they managed to put a PCI Express slot on there. So you could do, if you want to use it as a gaming machine, you can still get a GPU in there. Just make the box a little taller than it was. It's funny, there's another interesting article up on anantech.com this week, which I think I just managed to close on myself. Oh, there it is. They did a mobile GPU face-off. They're looking at AMD's dynamic switchable graphics versus NVIDIA's Optimus technology. And, you know, it's interesting. Before we get to the actual meat of this review, we have a disclaimer to make. Both laptops we're comparing came to us via NVIDIA. Now, before anyone cries foul, let me explain. First, we asked AMD for just such a laptop back in May. They just haven't been able to get us one yet. So it's you know, it's an interesting idea where you're basically looking at the ability to switch between you know, discrete and high-powered graphics, which is something has been really hard to find other than on the, oh my goodness, Alienware notebooks. Alienware's 11-inch notebook, which I've been mildly obsessed with. Not as obsessed as Roger Chang, my partner in crime on Techzilla. But if you're thinking about some of the graphics options on notebooks, it's a pretty good read. And you know, and one of the things for them is one of the first laptops that got to review with AMD switchable graphics in there. So if you are in the mobile market and thinking about getting gaming performance but still want battery life, that is definitely worth checking out. And I thought it was also interesting coming up on you know, PC gaming I think is back.
Yeah. So we had a presentation about some upcoming product announcement at NVIDIA, and kind of as a side story intro into this, they went through this information talking about the growth in PC gaming, which, you know, they first kind of mentioned it, and you're like, I don't really know what these guys are talking about. Obviously, they're very entrenched in the PC gaming market. They would love for it to be growing. They started off, and it was, you know, the first picture in that little story that I wrote kind of says it all. This fall and winter, you've got games like Dota 2, Batman Arkham City, Battlefield 3, Skyrim, Rage, The Old Republic MMO, Diablo 3, Deus Ex, which is already out. I mean, there are a lot of really, really good high-quality PC games that are either out or on their way out this fall and this winter.
Right.
Kind of making it a great time for PC gamers, which is why we've been getting a lot of questions. I mean, a lot of the emails we've been getting here on This Week in Computer Hardware have been about, Battlefield 3 is coming out. What do I need to upgrade my system to? So interesting research from DFC Intelligence, which does market research on gaming areas, shows that PC gaming revenue, so not necessarily individual sales, but revenue is actually growing much, much faster than consoles and will exceed consoles in total by 2014, which is kind of interesting. You look down at the next slide and we talk about how did this happen. If you go to Best Buy, if you go to GameStop, if you go to a place that sells video games, look at how much shelf space they dedicate to the Xbox 360 versus the PC. And you'll see that it's far and away the consoles are dominant there. And if you look at that graph, you'll see why the packaged sales of PC games are continuing to drop, and they're going to continue to drop. But there's this big growing bar on top of that, which is all of the digital sales. That counts Steam, that counts you know, the EA downloader applications.
On Live?
I don't know if it counts on Live actually, but what's kind of interesting is it counts things like League of Legends. It counts things like World of Tanks. These kind of games that don't follow the typical pattern of you give me $60, I give you a game. This is free to play style stuff. This is, we'll give you the game for free, but if you want to keep your character after a week, you got to give me $5. You want to keep your character after that week, you got to give me another $5. You know, those types of things. So different kind of play models. It includes World of Warcraft and other MMOs that are subscription based, right? So you're paying way more than $60 a year to play WoW if you're paying 15 or $20 a month, right? So it's actually growing. It's just the typical way that we measure these types of things, like just game sales at a retail establishment, are very different. So that's actually good news for gamers. It's good news for those of us who are PC enthusiasts and fans. And then if you look at, there's another interesting slide where they looked at the relative performance of consoles versus PCs over time. And if you look at it, the blue bar that represents consoles is static, basically, from 2005 straight across to 2011. So this is the release of the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Nothing has improved really in that time period. But if you look at what PC gaming has done, it's gone from being about 50% faster than the consoles to now being close to 9 times the performance of the consoles if you look at the GTX 580. And if PC games are growing, if the PC gaming audience is growing, the hope is that these developers take notice of that, spend more time on PC versions than necessarily on console versions. If they go back, instead of doing console ports, they're doing PC ports to a console. You look at Battlefield 3, that's what you're getting out of that. You know, and some of the games like Diablo 3, Dota 2, Old Republic, those are going to be PC exclusives, at least initially, for quite some time. So, and you look at id Software's Rage is going to look much better on the PC as well. So it was an interesting kind of side note that I thought was worth sharing with everybody. You know, that a lot of people say PC gaming is dying. It's definitely not dying. It's just changing a whole lot, right? You know, if somebody had said, hey, we're going to let you play this game for free, you're going to take them up on that offer. And then these little microtransactions come in and into play. And it's much more kind of mimicking what is happening on like the iPhone, iPod game market than the traditional retail sales of consoles. So still good news.
Yeah. No, and it's amazing stuff, and it's piling, especially as I you know, it's kind of funny looking at some of the. It's obviously too early to make a real judgment call, but people are releasing screenshots of Battlefield 3 on the consoles versus Battlefield 3 on a PC, and it's, you know, man, even the PS3 graphics are starting to get a little long around the tooth. The Xbox 360 graphics have been long around the tooth for a while, so I think it's going to be interesting to. You know, fourth generation, fifth generation consoles have to be coming pretty fast, I think, at this point. We keep saying that, but hopefully, I hope they do, because that, as I kind of say at the end of that article, sorry to interrupt you, is that we want to raise that lowest bar. That's the issue, is because that lowest bar, the lowest common denominator these developers have to target. He's holding us back. He's holding us back.
That's holding the top from seeing any of those benefits. So.
And if you think about it, you know, in terms of PC gaming, high-end PC gaming or high-end PC gaming machines, I think are more affordable than they've ever been. I mean, you can really hard spend $1,500 on a gaming machine, but a $500 gaming machine is more capable than it's ever been in the last 10 years. Twitch at twitch.tv is the email address. We'd love to hear your questions. Right now, though, we want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors. I'm going to say
that's right. That's right. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by that very same company, Netflix, which is responsible for streaming thousands of TV episodes and movies directly to you instantly, which means you save time, money, and hassle involved with shipping things or even going to the store, any of those kind of red box displays or something like that. There are several easy ways to instantly access streaming movies and TV shows with Netflix. You can watch those movies and TV shows on your Mac, your PC, your iPad, your iPhone. Even some Android phones will now support Netflix streaming. If you have a gaming console like an Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 or even a Nintendo Wii, even though they may be way underpowered compared to your gaming PC, you can still stream Netflix on those. That is not an issue. If you're not a gamer, you can still watch Netflix streaming on your TV with like a Roku box, Apple TV, or some similar type of device. There are a lot of options there. So if you go to the Netflix site, you can definitely see all those options available to you for streaming. You can begin watching a movie or a TV show in one room or one location, your house, wherever, and then finish watching it wherever you have access to Netflix again. If you're watching a show before you go to bed, you got to get up and take the train into work or something like that. If your iPhone will support streaming, then you can finish watching the show or continue watching the show in that location. Was actually a pretty cool feature. Whichever way you choose to access Netflix, you can watch as many movies or TV shows as you want, anytime you want, as often as you want, anytime you have access to the internet. So that's pretty cool. And if for whatever reason you're not happy with the service, you can cancel it at any time. There are no contracts. There's no obligations here. And because there's no obligations, we actually want you to try Netflix completely free, 30 days. All you have to do is go to netflix.com/twit, TWIT, and sign up for your free 30-day trial there. Make sure you use that URL when you sign up, netflix.com/twit. We thank Netflix for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware, and we hope you enjoy streaming instantly with Netflix.
Woohoo! Thank you, Netflix. Got a question from Maxwell about monitor borders. He says, I've always wondered how much of a border around the edge of a flat metal monitor I could remove by taking the plastic housing off. Usually less than you think. I'm pretty handy and not really afraid to break the monitor. I know that tube-type TVs and CRT monitors, there are some pretty heavy-duty capacitors to worry about discharging accidentally, but I'm not sure about LCDs. I know newer monitors have fairly small borders now, but if I can make it better, well, why not? Well, I can think of 3 reasons why not. It's you spill a cup of coffee, somebody trips with a drink at a party. You've got a chance of your LCD surviving if that giant plastic case is still wrapped around it. You have no chance of it surviving if the guts of the monitor are exposed to the world. You know, I've seen anywhere from, you know, several years ago, like a 37-inch HD TV, you know, 37-inch diagonally might be 42 or 45 inches across diagonally once the case was included, especially because, you know, and in that particular TV, I thought to myself, gosh, you know, I could cut off these speakers off the bottom and I could, you know, make the case smaller. And, you know, if you're doing it as a hobby and you're experimenting, and most important of all, you aren't going to feel a lot of financial pain or emotional suffering if you trash the monitor in the process. Okay. You just need to figure out, you know, how you're going to sort of create a frame or a bezel or a picture frame around it, preferably not out of metal. There are no giant capacitors. There's nothing that's going to discharge and fry you. There is a chance of you creating electrical havoc and hurting yourself because in most cases you are running 120 volts into the back of the monitor where a you know, power conversion going on. I want to say they should be running DC by the time it gets to the CFC or the LEDs in there. But, you know, anytime you open up a case that has electricity running into it, you run the risk of hurting yourself or others. So do me a favor and unplug it before you start working on it. But if you're safe and prudent and don't do anything stupid like put a, you know, metal frame around a electricity-filled device without double insulating it, you know, you should be fine. You know, you also might find out that you maybe only be cutting, you know, depending on the monitor designs, there may only be 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch you can you know, find underneath that bezel.
That's kind of my issue here, is that the return on your time investment is going to be relatively low 99% of the time. There are some cases where a monitor or display might have like really purposely flamboyant edges to make it look nicer. But if you look at Dell's monitors, most of the Asus monitors I've used, that type of thing, they're trying to make the bezels as thin as they can already. And taking that plastic off, there's going to be screen, there's going to be electronics that kind of stick out a little bit because most of these have side lights, right? If they're not LED backlit, even if they're LED, they have lights coming in the sides, right? So that's kind of the determining factor on how thin they can get those bezels. And that's why if you look at some of the higher-end Samsung displays, and there's another one as well that's come out recently that do, you know, they're kind of marketed as having these really, really thin bezels. They're much more expensive because of the additional engineering required to actually get that done. Because I have a ton of monitors sitting around here, and I've often thought when I was setting up these 3-panel, 4-panel iFinity and NVIDIA Surround configurations, how can I make this better? How about if I just remove these panels? And the more research I did into it, the less interested I was in pursuing that. But
we could say that our favorite former co-host, who is now at Google, has done some fantastic things with a large pile of 30-inch LCD flats she inherited. But she also inherited a large pile of them for basically nothing. So when she went through the process of decasing them and putting them in new enclosures, you know, she had some really nice hardware to work with. It didn't have to, you know, even if she killed 2 of the 6, you know, there wasn't going to be any, you know what I mean? Again, this comes back to minimal financial impact or emotional trauma. But, you know, worst case scenario, take your time, open up the case, see if there's any space to save, you know, and try to figure out how to do it safely and sanely.
Very cool.
Darren's got a question about SSD power.
He says,
Go ahead.
Darren was saying he's looking to buy a 120 gig SSD for his laptop, which is a ThinkPad X220, which does apparently support SATA 3, which I guess SATA 3, SATA 6 gigabit per second, which is kind of surprising, but nice. Says he was looking for either the Corsair Force 3 when he noticed that the power consumption of the Force 3 is listed as 0.5 watts max idle, 2 watts max active. But the Intel 320 SSD is listed as 100 milliwatts typical idle and 150 milliwatt typical active. As this is for a laptop, power consumption is a concern. Do you have any idea of how to compare the power consumption of these drives? Notice that one is listing the max power consumption, one is listing typical. So if we look at typical idle at 100 milliwatts versus max idle at 500 milliwatts, essentially, between the two devices, that's a pretty significant margin, right. I guess, if we just look at those numbers. But my guess is the difference between going from a hard drive to an SSD is, in terms of power consumption, is going to be fairly substantial. But the difference between SSD to SSD is going to be very minimal in your actual real-world kind of views, right? And what you actually see and what results you actually get out of the drives. I don't think I would select one SSD or the other necessarily because of those ratings, especially because one is listing maximum rather than typical and the other one is listing the other way. It makes it very hard to even kind of get close to an apples to apples comparison. And honestly, our storage guy, Alan, you know, we've thought about adding power consumption tests into our SSD kind of testing allotment, but in our kind of short roundup of tests to see if these things were viable, they were all so close. It was pretty hard to like even measure noticeable differences in the consumption.
I just want to add that when you're looking at notebook performance or battery performance, the vast majority of your power is not being sucked down by the hard, even a rotating media hard drive. It's not being sucked down by the CPU. It's coming from your screen. That LCD flat panel, even if it's LED powered, is consuming probably the most significant chunk of the notebook's battery performance, followed by stuff like Wi-Fi. Wireless communications just absolutely sucks down battery. It's considerably better than it used to be. But yeah, I'm right alongside Ryan. Don't sweat these. You know, again, apples to oranges comparison. There's no really good standard for comparing these. You know, Alan's found out that basically they're all pretty delete expletive the same, and 2 watts is just not a lot of juice when you're looking at a 19-volt system. Just buy the fastest one you're comfortable with, or the biggest one you're comfortable with. Get rid of your rotating media. Embrace the happiness.
That's right.
Todd's got a question about notebook shifts in the near future. He says, my question is about what new hardware may be coming to laptops in the next 6 months. I try to start doing research on new hardware way ahead of potential purchases, and I'm curious if there's anything big coming around the corner that's worth waiting for. Ivy Bridge. Specifically, are there any new Intel chipsets coming near term? Ivy Bridge. Any expected new lines of mobile graphics cards? Who cares? Anything shrinking to a smaller nanometer production? Ivy Bridge, 22 nanometer. Sorry. This won't be a primary machine, so I'll be aiming for something reasonably portable, but need capable but not over-the-top gaming ability. Uh-oh. My game of choice is unfortunately one that is not particularly well optimized, so I'm hoping there will be some advancements like a die shrink that will bring improved gaming graphics to a 14, 15-inch machine. Any guidance you have is greatly appreciated. Gosh, do you think Ivy Bridge might be worth waiting for on this one?
You know,
I'm obsessed with Ivy Bridge, obviously. I'll just lay it out there right now.
My issue with waiting for Ivy Bridge is you're talking at least past January, like past CES.
Right.
You know, I don't think you're going to start seeing widely available models until like the February, March timeframe. So it really depends on how long you're willing to wait.
Well,
he
6
says
months, October, November, December, January, February, March. Perfect.
He did say in the next 6 months, yes. So I think you'll be right on that edge, I guess is what I'm saying. You'll be right on that edge. And he wants to do some gaming with it. The GPU inside Ivy Bridge is going to be much improved over the GPU in Sandy Bridge. Bar none, right? That said, if you get a 15-inch laptop today that has a discrete NVIDIA or AMD graphics in it, And based on our previous discussion, it sounds like NVIDIA has the best switchable graphics solution. If you get an Optimus-based Sandy Bridge notebook, so it has Sandy Bridge processor and graphics it uses for low power situations, and it'll have the discrete NVIDIA GPU for your mobile platform when you want to do gaming. I still believe that you will have equal or better graphics performance with most of the NVIDIA mobile GPUs out there today. So I guess my thought would be, if you're trying to wait 6 months, then Ivy Bridge will be out and you'll be able to buy something based on that. If your fear is buying something this week and something in 6 months is going to come out that's going to blow away what you have, I don't think you have to worry about that necessarily. Ivy Bridge is going to be a modestly better CPU with a much better GPU.
Right.
But I still think they're going to be playing catch up to what NVIDIA and AMD have out in the discrete fashion, especially when it comes to gaming. If he hadn't mentioned gaming, would have been, a pretty different answer. But he even says, my game of choice is unfortunately one that is not particularly well optimized. So means he's looking for a little bit more GPU power than maybe your traditional everyday laptop user.
Buying a notebook is really easy, kind of, until you get gaming into the equation, and then gaming makes everything more difficult than it needs to be.
Today I got in probably the best gaming notebook out there. We'll see. I haven't taken it out of the box yet. The Alienware M17X with the Radeon HD 6990 graphics in it. So we will see how that pretends. Now it's a little bigger than I want to carry. A little bigger, probably a little more expensive than a lot of people want to spend, but should be pretty nice. We have an email from Tracy about overall upgrade options. Hey guys, first off, thanks to both Patrick and Ryan for bringing such great info on computer hardware. I've been a fan since the old screensavers days on Tech TV. I've been in the field for 19 years. It's nice to see good information delivered in an interesting fashion. Thank you. Anyway, here's my question. There was a time when I stayed on the bleeding edge of technology, played all the current games. That time has since passed. Now I'm several generations back on hardware, the seldom game. I have a box Phenom X4 955 ECS micro ATX motherboard, 4 gigs of DDR memory, NVIDIA 9500 GT graphics, 3.5 terabytes of storage, DVD burner, etc., that kind of stuff. He says he flies Flight Sim X. He wants to upgrade to get better performance in Flight Simulator, but from what I understand reading on forums, Flight Simulator X is more CPU intensive than GPU. Flight Simulator X runs okay with moderate settings, but with aftermarket textures, AI traffic, and higher settings, it chokes down into the single-digit rates. So would I be better off throwing money at a video card, a new motherboard CPU RAM combination, or both? Of course, I don't want to spend too much money, but I do want to do the smart thing. I'd appreciate any input. That whole system is fairly outdated.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of personal experience with Flight Simulator X. If you're reading that on the forums, that game tends to be more CPU intensive than GPU intensive. You're running a quad core processor, so you're probably doing okay on the CPU side. The NVIDIA 9500 GT is more than slightly long in the tooth.
Right.
Do you have anything in particular? I have my general advice, which is you're debating buying a new video card, a new CPU, motherboard, combination platform, or both. So what I would recommend is buy an upgraded video card. If that fixes the problem for you, great. You don't have to spend any more money. If you don't think it fixes the problem for you, then you go down the path of, do I also need to upgrade my CPU and motherboard?
I mean, it's kind of funny because it's been out for a while. It was set up originally for DirectX 9. Minimum system requirements for a 1 gigahertz CPU, 256 megabytes RAM. Obviously, this is back in the and still you actually run into video game manufacturers, publishers that the minimum of specs means it'll kind of boot the game and you can kind of play it as long as you don't get attacked. But the recommended system requirements, which are the real minimum requirements, is like a 3.6 gigahertz CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, 512 megabyte video card. It's kind of funny. It's kind of interesting. How to improve like Flight Simulator 10 with hardware upgrades, graphics cards. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people talking about better ways to do this. Darren's never around from Hack 5 when I need him. Because he is a flight simulator.
Okay.
Obsessive, for lack of a
nice.
For lack of a less gracious term. Why don't we ask for responses from the audience? Twitch at twit.tv. I'll ask around a couple people I know who play Sims, and we'll see what we can find out. I think processor-wise, it's probably in pretty good shape. I would hope that a GPU upgrade would do it, but again, it's been a long time since I've played around with hardware upgrades for a flight sim.
Agreed.
Salty has a question about a free Linfield platform. He says, "Hi guys, I'm confused about CPUs, and I can't think of anyone better to call. I'm honored, I think. I recently received a socket 1156 i3 powered computer for a very good price, free. 8 gigs of DDR3 memory, 850 watts of power supply, and a 2 terabyte hard drive. I was thinking of upgrading to a faster CPU and a Radeon 6950 GPU. I can get a Linfield i5 760 for around 150 pounds. I think it's still like $300 to us. But how does Linfield compare to Sandwich?"
Linfield is the architecture before it, so it's
not bad.
It's not bad, right? It's if you're not interested in the integrated graphics, you're not going to be missing out on a whole lot. So I was looking at the specific processor he mentioned. Which one was that? The i5 760, which is a quad-core 2.8 gigahertz part, no hyper-threading, I believe. So the CPU architecture is definitely improved going from Linfield to Sandy Bridge. Not by a dramatic percentage, not nearly as much as the integrated graphics. Actually, Linfield doesn't have integrated graphics, does it? No, it does not. Okay. It was the first architecture to implement the speed step technology. It is quad-core, no hyper-threading. I'm just trying to revamp my memory here, so to speak. I mean, it's going to be a little bit lower performing.
Right.
One of my primary systems at my house is still based on a Linfield platform as well, and it does just fine even for gaming. And I'm using a Radeon 6870 or 5870 on one of those machines as well. So, especially considering it was free, it's hard to argue with that, right?
Yeah, part of me wants to say, like, why don't you just try doing stuff with the Core i3 and the existing GPU and see if that does what you want. If it doesn't, then upgrade. Because the Core i3 is actually, for if people are like Core i3, I use it for a media server, maybe for my kid's machine. But the Core i3 is actually a pretty capable processor. I think it just gets, because it's got the low number, I think it gets slagged a lot more than it particularly deserves. But
because the rest of the hardware there is pretty good, right? So I'm
8
guessing
gigabytes of DDR3, a huge power supply.
Oh yeah, more than enough for that 6950. I agree. This is kind of like, I feel like a broken record, but buy that Radeon 6950, and if you still think the system isn't fast enough for what you want to do, then then you can spend another $200 or however that works out to in pounds on a new CPU. I think it looks like you can go as high as like the Intel Core i7. A hyper-threaded part unlocked, so you can even overclock it. That's like $350 still. So that's kind of within your range if you're talking about the $300 to 150 pounds type of thing. So there's
I think
start with the GPU.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, it's like Core i5. There's a lot of Linfield processors still available. Core 1156 pin CPUs. Yeah, wait. Definitely wait on that one.
So quick, we got another email here from Gareth about potential data loss. Patrick, this is bad news. He says, I'm in need of some help at the risk of data loss. I have 4-drive RAID 10, essentially, controlled by an Intel P35 ICH 9R chipset. I can't seem to get post any video or even shut off the machine using the power button. After hours of troubleshooting, I'm going forward with the assumption that the motherboard is dead. Here's my question. Can I recover the RAID? I'm thinking I could try to find another ICH 9R motherboard. But what about trying an ICH 10R? Is it backwards compatible? What about a move to a Z68 chipset as an upgrade opportunity? Patrick can put the plug in here about always backing off backing up data offsite. I thought I was in the clear with the RAID until the controller bites it.
You know, you're never in the clear. You got one physical copy of the data, and the machine gets stolen. Whoops. Hey, can you guys hold on for 1 second? I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. So the offsite backup is still important, right? And this is something I found out the hard way as well. When a RAID goes bad, it doesn't necessarily help you. And if it's like I had some RAID 1's drives, and then one wasn't bootable, the other one was, and you had to worry about moving over master boot records and that kind of stuff. So there's still the issue there. As for being able to move the whole RAID array, it gets very touchy. If Alan were here, here's what he'd recommend. Definitely find a motherboard with the same chipset. Maybe you can even borrow it from a friend for a day or something like that. And here's what's important. I hope you can remember what your BIOS settings were on that motherboard. So you want to make sure when you boot up the new motherboard with the same controller, the same kind of South bridge. I think the ICH-10R should be compatible too. But you want to make sure you have, the BIOS set in RAID mode for your storage controller, not IDE mode or AHCI, because then it's going to try to treat those drives differently. And if it tries to boot off them a little bit differently, it may screw up your MBR, the master boot record, and then, you're going to have more difficulty getting the data off of it. Now, what you could also do is install a 5th drive, and install a base copy of Windows on it on your new platform. This is what I tend to do when I build a new system. I buy a new hard drive with it, install that, and then you set up whatever RAID array you want to do that way. Now you've got all of your data on those hard drives, and you'll be able to get all that data off. Now then you still have to reinstall all your applications and everything with that route, but I think that seems a little safer. If you're worried about having to reinstall Windows on all your applications, go the route of trying to replace the motherboard with something that's identical or as close to identical as possible. If you're more worried about a lot of personal data, photos, videos, whatever on there, important records, then that data will exist in some fashion on there. So, I think you'll be able to access it one way or the other, but it's definitely take your time, do some more research, just Google around in forums and that kind of stuff, and make sure that you are able to do that. Actually, if you send an email, send a follow-up email to us, twit.tv, and I'll forward it on to Alan as well, and maybe get a little bit more specific knowledge on this subject. So,
yeah, sorry about that. We had a little explosion in the other room.
Understand.
There's that great line from... oh, you okay? There's that great line from the Navy SEAL movie. Oh, okay. Calm down. Where 2 is 1, 1 is none. RAID is not a backup solution. RAID is part of a backup solution.
Yep. Agreed. 100%.
Copies, you're begging for something bad to happen to your data.
Yep.
Say hi.
Yeah.
Say hi, Ryan.
Well, you know what? Actually, I think that comes to a nice stopping point for us anyway. We always like to end on a down note, which is, sorry, hope you don't lose all your data, right?
All right. Want to go run in the other room? All right. Then you need...
Not so much. So
all right.
I will wrap up the show for us, Patrick. Not a big deal here. Let's email us, please. We want all your questions, even if we can't. We apologize we can't answer all of them every week. We're getting a lot of good quality questions, though. We appreciate that. Twich, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address for us. You can find Patrick at Patrick Norton on Twitter. I'm at Ryan Shrout. And also you can find me at pcper.com, which is my normal hangout website where we write all of our articles and reviews. Patrick is over there at Techzilla and at Revision 3. Do you have anything in particular coming up this week that you'd like to plug, or general purpose?
We finished our Hackintosh build this week. That actually is up on the... If the sound has changed from my beautiful Heil microphone, you'll know why. Take your hand away.
It's not the
mic. Our
Hackintosh
build got posted today. We got app radio and the indestructible hard drive.
Very
and
cool.
On PC coming up this week.
Yeah, we're gonna play around with that M17X notebook. That should be pretty cool. We're finally gonna do video and kind of live setup and demonstration of the Galaxy MDT5 graphics card, the NVIDIA card that can do 5 displays. That's actually pretty modestly priced. If we can get our whole AV and audio system set up and working here relatively soon, so we've got a lot of that cool stuff up. Also, I guess I'll go ahead and officially plug for the first time. If you are in the San Francisco, Oakland area and you are interested in going to GeForce LAN, which is an event, I think October 14th to the 16th. It's going to be on the USS Hornet there in Alameda, kind of out in Patrick's neck of the woods, actually. I will be there kind of hosting another event like the hardware workshop we had at QuakeCon. So we'll have lots of prizes and Q&As and questions and demonstrations and that kind of stuff. Should be pretty cool. Details forthcoming. I think the LAN party itself is sold out, like all the spots in that. But if I'm not mistaken, you'll still be able to come in and look around at all the demos and see what's all the vendors have on display. So it should be fun if anybody's in the area.
You should do a Twitch gathering while you're out here.
Yeah, I can actually, we could definitely do that.
Want to say goodnight?
Maybe after the recording on next Thursday or something like that.
Bye.
So. Now he's not shy.
He's been shy on and off all day. Thanks, everybody, for your patience during the excitement at the tail end of the podcast. And don't forget to back up your data on site. Wait,
exactly.
Off site.
Both.
Oh, my goodness. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
Are you Seamus? Yeah, we'll see you next week on Twitch.
Surprise guest spot.